But I think it's really important to understand how they interact with our body in the first place. How that energy transfers or carries over to us in other objects.
Right. I've understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, that crystals are the Earth's DNA, right? So, which means they contain information literally from the beginning of time, which makes them so powerful, such powerful tools to use. And they also vibrate on a very similar frequency to the human body. So it makes them very effective healing tools as well. Am I correct in my assumption, not assumption, or what my understanding is around that?
Well, everything has its natural resonant frequency. Everything on Earth does, from the biggest particles on down to the smallest. So it's like looking through a pair of glasses when you're dealing with crystals. Crystals just amplify or magnify what you're trying to look through or look for. In my opinion, they're neither good nor bad, but if they've been used in a bad way, that makes them bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that the dark team would not be using them in a bad way, though, unless they were super powerful, right? Because from what we're understanding more and more, they really are used a lot.
That probably doesn't look very familiar to you in any way, shape, or form. And you may or may not have heard of appetite. But if you want to understand a few things about your body has crystals inside of it too. Some of them, they just spiritual people have known about it, but science is just discovering some of this stuff. Appetite is actually made up, or your teeth are actually made up of appetite, sorry. Your teeth. So every time you speak, talk, smile, look in the mirror, look at your teeth, you're looking at appetite.
Wow.
So there's one crystal in your body. Calcite is found in your third eye or your pineal gland. Which we can talk about that for a bit if you want to. So everything is kind of related to the moment of conception. And it continues in a cycle. So at some point we'll talk about sexual intercourse, not as a primer or a teaching of it, just because it relates to it and how the energy is transferred through that particular function. I don't know if you know what your sacrum is.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain it?
Well, your sacrum is the lower part of your body, right?
It's your hip bones.
Yes. So I'm trying to figure out how calcite is related to your sacrum.
We'll get there.
Okay.
The sacrum is connected to the backbone. In this, I'll take a slight rabbit trail, but not very far. The backbone and the sacrum form a shovel shape. If you were to remove the ribs and the legs and everything else, it forms like a shovel. So remember that.
Yeah.
And I'll refer you to the Initiates of the Flame book to find out for yourself what that means. So I really don't want to be teaching anything on that, but it starts with the sacrum and ends with the skull. And we're going to make some correlations with a few things too. Your brain and your nervous system, if you were to take just the brain and just the spinal cord, what does that look like to you? If you were to draw a small illustration of it.
Brain and spinal cord, I don't know, flower?
Sperm cell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And if you know anything about how you develop from a fertilized egg, initially fertilized egg into a zygote to everything else, where would you think that you start from? What do you think develops first? You start from You start from your hind end
Yeah.
outward from there. So you start out as your butthole. Kind of silly to say that, but that's how you start to form, is from that point forward. And you kind of grow along and replicate along the lines of that sperm cell. The two genetic codes match and meet. And they all have their information to develop into the organs that they become.
So hang on, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. So what you're saying is we actually develop from the anus, so to speak, right? And going upwards to the brain. And all the organs and stuff will obviously, as we climb up, get to the top, will be developed along the way.
Correct.
Okay,
in a really basic sense, that's how that works.
Yeah, until you get to the third eye.
Until you get to your brain and everything that encases your third eye.
Right.
So you could correlate it to Kundalini, chakras, all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to talk about that today because my breathing was correct. You're not supposed to hold your abdominal and back tight to suck in your gut to look good. That's not how you're supposed to breathe. You're supposed to breathe naturally. And people don't know how to breathe naturally. They're replacing breathing naturally by smoking, by overindulging in food, those kinds of activities. So you don't get that flow of your cerebrospinal fluid, your ferrofluid, your inductance motor, what creates that electromagnetic energy in your pineal gland, which empowers you to do what you need to do in life. Is that pretty clear, or am I talking up the far side of
No, it makes such sense because I know, I mean, through having done yoga for many years now, breathing is such an important part, and not just in yoga, like in anything. And I know for a fact we've been taught, when you look at how a baby breathes, for example, when a baby's born, it breathes naturally, right? So that's the proper way when a baby's first born that we should all be breathing. But somewhere along the line, our breath gets changed. We're not taught the proper ways to breathe. We're generally breathing from the clavicular breathing, right? And it should be like, as you say, deep down into the belly. And what we're doing now is because we're not breathing properly, in other words, oxygenating our body, our cells in a healthy way, we're now making use, we compensating or overcompensating in other areas, such as drinking, bad eating, that sort of thing, right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
At the moment, I think it's just important that we can understand from Caleb how the body works, like the crystals in our body, the frequency around, in our bodies, especially relating to the crystals that we have within the body. So when we are using crystals that are not good, or we are unaware that that crystal might have something in it that we're unaware of, especially if you're not very experienced in these things, you don't know what's coming through that crystal. And it might feel good in the body in that moment, right? It might feel good in the body in that moment, but in the long run, it can actually be very dangerous. Yeah.
Correct. You have to know where you sourced your material from. I wouldn't go to a retailer and buy any of this. They're easy enough to find on your own, because you don't know who's put what on what. You can definitely cleanse them, and we can talk about that at some point too. But I'm just trying to get you to see the impact that your personal energy, if you want to call it that, or spirit. I prefer to say spirit interacts with these things, because you have crystal and structures inside your own body. There's a big one that people ignore a lot. It has a lot to do with how we absorb oxygen. It's iron in your blood on a subatomic level, or in the microverse. Iron is all through your whole body. Everybody thinks, oh, that's just a mineral. Well, it's also a crystal too, especially on that small scale. So people want to look at the outside world and say, well, this is all there is. No, you got to go inward too, not just spiritually, but your physicality. It pays to know how your body works, how it functions. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I mean, it really, really does.